I'd like to call to order the December 8th meeting for environmental matters. And for the record, all the members are present. And let's see, do I have any motion to approve the agenda?
Madam Chair, I'll move approval of the agenda as written.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Did I say Madam Chair? I'm sorry. Mr. Chair.
Beard's confusing.
Well, can I get the second one right, Mr. Chair? Move approval of the minutes from the November 10th meeting.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I can't really second it because I wasn't here. You actually
true.
have
I'll
to second
I'll
it.
That's
second
right,
that.
yeah.
And all right, sorry, it's hot in here. All right, we have an appointment to make, AP 7122. Do I have a motion for AP 7122? You can come on up, Miss
Janice.
Miss Janice. So welcome to our meeting here. If you could introduce yourself, your background, and why you are interested in serving on the Environmental Commission.
Sure. My name is Jenny Janice, and I have a background in environmental planning, urban planning, and landscape architecture. I have a focus in green infrastructure. Okay. I have a focus in green infrastructure, and I'm interested in joining the Environmental Commission. I saw Randy speak, and have been tuned into some of the planning initiatives going on in the city. So I just wanted to add my voice to that.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Are there any questions from the committee?
Just admiration for your resume.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
I'd just like to say thank you for being willing to volunteer your time to serve. It's greatly appreciated. I know you could be doing a lot of other things looking at your resume.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, I think it's an important, it's important to add my voice. I think the opportunity to add my voice is a really important one. So I'm hoping to help shape in any way I can comments and advice, maybe.
Actually, some vitality, because we haven't seen the commission here for a couple of meetings. So we do like to hear from the Environmental Commission, what you're doing. We're your counterpart on the council, and the community writ large is remarkably engaged in environmental matters. So I think it is an important committee, and we need your input.
Oh, that's good to hear.
May I follow up?
Yeah.
You mentioned green infrastructure at a meeting, I guess on yesterday. We were talking about the CIP capital improvement projects. And the question was asked about, I think it was the Stan Center, and whether we were putting a green roof on that building. And I know that's kind of the lowest level of opportunity for green. But I would particularly be interested in your voice in encouraging that kind of project within our developments that are around the city. I don't think anybody is speaking to that and encouraging as projects come in to say, what is it that you could be adding to your project? So I think you would have a definite voice for us. So that would be appreciated.
That's exactly what I would hope to do. And I don't think green roofs are the lowest common denominator at all.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you have any, I've thought over the years about trying to introduce some kind of policy regarding green roofs and trying to get more of those. So if you have a recommendation through the commission, that'd be great. And as far as, I'm just curious, since it looks like you've done quite a bit of work with green infrastructure, And have you been in Annapolis for a while?
2 years. I grew up in Ocean City, Maryland, actually,
Okay.
but moved to Annapolis 2 years ago after spending 9 years in Texas. And Texas is really where I learned a lot about, especially in Houston and in Austin, about managing stormwater and a lot of the technical details that go into it. Worked for a civil engineering company that did global projects, but focused mostly on the domestic projects, and helped write standards for low impact development. So yeah.
Good. And have you seen any potential areas to focus with green infrastructure in Annapolis thus far?
I see lots of potential everywhere.
It's good to hear.
Yeah.
Good. And I just, and to say, my colleague's point about, I think is a good idea to perhaps bring back to the commission about taking a look at some of the CIP projects, the capital improvement projects, and if you may have any suggestions to pass along to staff. I know the staff was just at the last finance committee, I think, to go over all of our CIP projects, but also, you might want to ask the chair. There's a new stormwater manager within Public Works that is coordinating that program, and the board may be interested in hearing from Betsy. I'm blanking on her. What's Betsy's last name? I'm blanking on it, Sam. McEwen.
McEwen.
Yes, thank you. But in any case, thank you. Any other questions?
I make a motion, we recommend approval.
Second?
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. And this will be going, I think, on Monday's agenda for the city council. You don't have to go to that. That's typically they just get approved as long as the committees have recommended them.
Okay.
So
Great.
after Monday, you'll be an official member.
All right. That's
Well, thank you
exciting.
again.
Thank you.
You said it is definitely on the agenda.
Okay. All right, next up on the agenda, we have 05222 streets, turtle-friendly curbs. And Mr. Bryce, if you'd be willing to join us at the table, it'd be great. And I guess I'll give a little bit of an introduction on this. Julian, do you have those? Are you able to put up any of those photos?
There he is.
Oh, there you go. Thank you. So this is something I've been mulling in my head for a while, just based on walking around our neighborhood with my son, and we often see these little turtles of all ages and sizes crossing the road because we have the smooth curb in our it's a rolled curb in our community, and that's my dog sniffing a box turtle that was on the sidewalk. But my neighbors actually end up fencing off. When the turtles come into the yards and make nests like that, the neighbors end up fencing them off to protect them. Yeah, there's some big turtles that make nests back there. So it just got me thinking of, well, especially in the critical area, perhaps we should be requiring this on new development and perhaps when we replace some existing curbing. And so if you look at the legislation, it's only restricted to non-arterial roadways. And so Sam could probably define this better than I, but arterial roadways are the roadways with more traffic and higher capacity. And so the non-arterial intention is to capture some of the smaller community streets. So the legislation, I'm bringing it up now. It also mentions, so the way it's worded is that, let's see, it requires this curb in new construction along non-arterial, city-owned and/or maintained streets located within the city's critical area. And it also mentions in number 2 there that the director shall develop and adhere to a new construction schedule for replacing existing curbs with turtle-friendly curbs. And so that section there was added because actually the Environmental Commission was asking me about this and said, well, Rob, this only impacts new construction. What about our existing roadways? And so I put that in there to give the department basically the discretion to create their own schedule for when an existing roadway might be getting replaced or sidewalk might get replaced, as far as when the curbs might get changed over. So that's basically in a nutshell. Do you have any questions for me, or do you want to hear from Mr. Bryce on
I
Public
do
Works?
have a question about existing. I'm looking as you were reading, I was trying to find, is it under section 14.01.020.2? Is that where you're talking about existing curbs? Where does it speak to replacing existing curbs with turtle-friendly curbs?
You're right, line 18.
Yeah, 17 through 19.
Okay, that's what I was reading. That's what I thought you were referring to. So we want the director to develop and adhere to a new construction schedule for replacing. I don't understand what that means. Adhere to a new construction schedule for replacing existing curbs? So we want to follow the same schedule we would follow for new construction? Is that what this means?
Yeah, maybe the wording isn't the best, but the intention is to basically to develop a replacement program, because Public Works often replaces, as a part of their existing contract, replaces a sidewalk or a roadway. And so this would be developing some kind of policy where it's kind of in their judgment if they would determine if it's a certain amount of feet, for example, I don't know, 200, 500, 1,000 feet of street was going to be replaced or sidewalk was going to replace, that it would need to comply with these standards.
Okay, so what we're getting to is whenever there's some replacement of existing curb, where possible, we want to add a turtle-friendly curb.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or brand new, but yeah.
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 Yeah. I just want that to be clear that that's what we're talking about. And I can see Mr. Bryce frowning, so he may have some objection to that.
Well, I should wear a mask.
Is your mic on?
Yeah.
No.
There. I should be wearing a mask so you won't see me frowning. And I think I believe your paragraph 2 is probably more recent than when I originally reviewed this, I think back in October. In new construction, I don't see an issue with doing something like this in the critical areas, not on non-arterial roadways. I would caution that in some of our developments, because of the parking issues, when you go to a sloped curb, I think you're going to, unless you have got a grass buffer between your sidewalk and your curbing, even if you don't have a grass, even if you do have a grass buffer, some people have a tendency to then drive over that curb and park up on the sidewalk or tear the ground up. That's just the downside of it, but I don't think that makes it impossible. That's just an issue associated with it. If this is something you would like us to pursue in the new developments, I don't see a problem with that. I do not like for the type of curb, for example, Alderman Savage, that you have in your community, which is a slanted curb and has been around for any number of years, because that particular curb, the slope on it has a tendency to not be very car friendly. And so in many cases, if you look at the results of those curves, you'll see that the roadway beyond that driveway is torn up because the car keeps hitting it, and it does damage to the vehicles. So I'm not a big fan of that curb. Now I noticed in reviewing some of the new county standards, it appears that they have a new curb that is appears, and I haven't looked at it, looked at it in a whole lot of detail, appears to be more vehicle friendly. So you would not have that, you may not have that damage. But again, I'd like to look at that further. I went in and also kind of tried to look to see if I saw anything in some other states. I know that Florida is promulgating some things, but there were not a whole lot of details on that. But I think that if you want to pursue some type of sloped curb, I think that is doable. But again, I would like to look at that a little bit further in the implementation of that to make sure that we're coming up with something of value. Again, looking at what you've got in your community, what I have seen over many years, because these have been around since the early 70s, those drive-over curbs. Many of those, which you see, the property owners have actually gone out and put an asphalt ramp in, so they stop damaging their car. So again, I don't see a big problem with it, but I think we need to look at it to make sure hydraulically it's good, as well as vehicle it's good. I think that the issue associated with the replacement of curbs in existing construction is kind of a very different issue. We very rarely see conditions where we are doing wholesale curb replacement. What we normally do is we are doing curb replacement 10, 15 feet to replace the existing curb. Again, we very seldom do long runs of curb unless it's, we got a piece, a short piece, and then a good short piece, and then another bad piece. We may do longer runs there, but we rarely do significantly long runs of replacement. So I think that what you're proposing there may not be very applicable. I also know from dealing with the various communities that when you get away from the barrier curb, meaning the vertical curve, with the parking situation, people park where they want to park, and that can also become another issue. But again, I think the biggest problem with this is we don't go in and replace all the curb on Chesapeake Avenue. We replace 10 foot here, and then 100 feet down the road, we replace another 10 feet, and between those, maybe we place 15 feet or 20 or 70 feet of sidewalk that was damaged, but it's not that wholesale replacement of curb or curb and gutter.
All right, are there any questions from Mr. Bryce?
I had a question, and maybe anyway, what is the difference between the sloped, the slanted, which I guess is the mountable, and an angled curb? And then it sounds like you're describing a fourth type, Mr. Bryce.
I interpreted, when I reviewed this, was that Alderman Savage was looking for a curbing that was not a barrier, was not a vertical faced curb like we see in most subdivisions. What he was looking for was more of a slanted curbing, similar to what you see in August Woods and in Georgetown Grove. Both of those are a slanted curb. Again, I don't like that curb because of the problems that you see with vehicles going over top of it. And I believe that Alderman Savage has made a number of suggestions here. I think that where we would go with that is we would go to a slanted curb looking towards, and again, I have not looked at it in a whole lot of detail, looking at what the county has proposed as a replacement for the mountable curb that Alderman Savage has in his community, and we see in a number of communities. And again, I have not looked at that in a whole lot of detail, other than to look at it and go, the county has clearly gotten tired of the problem associated with these curbs, and they've come up with something else that may work better. and I'd want to look further at that, but I think we can come up with something that will meet the requirement of having a slope to it that we can promulgate for the new developments.
Yeah,
I don't want to belabor this, but why is the county replacing their curbs? Is it because of the turtles?
I don't know. I know that when I started work in 74, or 75 with the county, they had in their standard a mountable curb. The reason that they had put in these mountable curbs was because the developers liked them. And the reason the developer liked them is then they did not have to decide where they were putting in the driveway entrances during the development. So they could bring the curb machine in, go in that direction. They ran the curbing in. No one had to come back and cut the concrete out for the driveway entrances. What you saw was, as someone who was then going out to look at it after construction, what you saw were the homeowners were coming back and they were either cutting driveway entrances in to meet a standard entrance where you cut down that curb, or they were going to get some cold mix and they were extending that slope out about that far into the street, which means that the water is ponding in the street because it can't get down the gutter. What I suspect, and again, I have not spoken to the county, is they don't want to do that anymore. They want to have a curb that goes in and stays in as that continuous concrete curb. That is my suspicion. But again, I looked at it very quickly when I first looked at this ordinance. My suspicion was that Alderman Savage, having worked for the county, perhaps saw that as one of his guides of where he was going. But I think that the county is just tired of dealing with the problem, and developers are still going to want to put in sloped curbs, so they've come up with something that perhaps works better.
Thank you.
it just offer some clarity. I didn't want to get into too many details as far as the design. That's why I have on page 2, lines 21 through 25, it basically mentions there that it's going to be up to the department to promulgate the rules and regulations, including mentioned in here, including the standard details for construction, because as Mr. Bryce stated, there are a number of different technologies, and if they change frequently, but this allows, I think, the department to choose a standard that's going to work from them, but still accomplish the intent of the legislation, which would be something which is the smooth, some kind of sloped, slanted curb, and that includes specifying, I think, in the standard, some kind of driveway cutting, because in my community, we have the slanted curb, rolled curb, but we do have driveway cuttings. So, and it works. I think there are drawbacks and benefits to each approach. We don't see too many. Sometimes the cars park up on the sidewalks, but frankly, we have so many dog walkers. People know fairly well. They pretty much stay off the sidewalk with their cars. So that hasn't been too much of an issue. But the one benefit I've heard, as opposed to the straight curb, I've heard from some of the seniors, is that it's just much easier to get over that smooth curb than it is the straight. So, but all that said, I do think Mr. Bryce and Public Works will be able to include those details they want in the specifications. And Alderman Arnett, you need your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, Sam, thank you for taking the time to look at the legislation. We don't always get that courtesy, so your efforts are appreciated. When I was growing up in Northern Virginia, so this tells you it's not new technology, we didn't have a slanted curve like this. It was more like an OG shaped curve. And I'm wondering, it seems like there might be different curb technologies with different aspects to them.
I think what you see is there are a number of curb types that you see out there. You know, if you look at State Highway has an 8-inch curb. We have a 6-inch curb. County has a 6-inch curb. You know, State Highway has an 8-inch curb because before you had milling, you had to pave over top the curb. So by having an 8-inch curb, you kept 6 inches when you were finished. And I have also seen those OG type of curbs. I have not seen them in this county. So I'm not I'm not real sure how those aspects work. But I have seen them.
I like them, but the only reason I bring it up is it seems like there are a number of options, and I don't think we on the council will presume to tell Public Works the best option to go. I think what we're trying to say is whatever option gets the turtles over the hump is one that we like. And so if we're being too specific in the legislation, I think we can modify it to make it give you the latitude you need.
I think one of the things I always like to stress when we look at the construction issues is you want to make sure that whatever you put in place is something that your staff is familiar with, as well as the construction group. Okay, our staff is familiar with building barrier curb. Our staff is able to build, because it's a very straightforward situation, they're able to build the slanted curb. I'm not sure I want to say to our staff, go out and build an OG curb. So.
All right. So I would suggest to you, Alderman Savage, that you are ahead of your time. And the reason I suggest that is in Ward 8 on the peninsula, we're going through a process of putting in new gas lines, then new water lines, and then doing complete streets, at which time we will be replacing all of the existing curbs and sidewalks. And so that could well be the time for this kind of a program to be initiated. I see you shaking your head no.
I think that I have members of my staff who have said things that in their minds they understood, that they thought they understood, but they were not communicating well. They have looked at complete streets because of some of the problems we had in Eastport earlier. Namely, when BG&E came in and did their work over towards State Street and Severn Avenue, they came back and they repaved the streets. The problem was when they repaved the street, they only repaved half of the street. They did not look at the curbing where the curbing was damaged. They did not look at the sidewalk where the sidewalk was damaged. They did not look at the water mains, etc. So when they repaved the streets, the residents, because they only repaved half section, the residents became very upset about that. Why didn't you fix my street? Why is that piece of street that was just repaved falling apart? You didn't do anything with the curb to repair the damaged curb or sidewalk. And so part of my staff went and started to talk about complete streets. So we go in and BG&E comes in and replaces the gas line. We come in and we replace that old water line. Then we come in after all of that is done, and by the way, we accept money from BG&E for this. We do the repaving, and when we do the repaving, we also repair the curb and gutter where it is damaged. We repair the sidewalk where it is in bad shape, and they referred to that as complete street. But the intention from what they were thinking was that very narrow view. They were not prepared to go in and replace all of the curb, all of the gutter, all of the sidewalk. They were looking at continuing to do what we do elsewhere in the city, and I do not feel, and I think that what they thought was not conveying the same message to everyone else, because what we also hear is, as you listen to some of the bigger agencies talk about complete streets, a lot of that has to do with redoing some of the things you're talking about, but also putting things in like bicycle paths and other features to the streets.
So this is a dramatic change in what then City Manager Gerald promised to me and the Eastport Civic Association. And I think that we need to get, aside from this legislation, I think we need to have some kind of meeting of the minds, because the community is expecting new sidewalks, new curbs, new fully repaved street after the water mains go in.
And I believe that could be a good conversation to have. I had that conversation with Michael Johnson about this while he was still director, and his understanding was what I have just relayed on to you. If you may want to have further discussions with Director Gerald, and as he may direct us to proceed, we will naturally, if the decision is to do that, then we would naturally pursue that. That is not where they are headed right now. What we are looking at is the same thing that we did in Germantown and in West Annapolis, where we have done similar projects. It is just what I have described to you. But would you have said to talk to Director Gerald? That is fine. And again, if we are directed to do something different, then that is fine. I will mention to you that as you go into the older communities and you start to look at doing some of the major reconstruction, as you're describing here, that creates a slightly different problem. Because if I come in, for example, what I know that I've got in Eastport, where I have 3, 4, 5-inch curb, and then sidewalk behind that. If I come back in and go to put a standard curb in, which is 6 inches, I've now raised that ground behind the sidewalk 2 to 3 inches. That can create a drainage problem, because now the water is not draining from those yards. But I share that with you just as a comment, so you're aware of it. But again,
So let me just say,
I have no, whatever.
the promise was made that for the price of the disruption of the gas line main replacement, followed and not being simultaneous with water mains replacement, so they were going to be sequential, the promise was explicitly made that the payoff to the community, who has long suffered with sidewalks that are in terrible disrepair and curbs in disrepair, the payoff was going to be that we were going to get complete streets from the edge of the sidewalk, the inside edge of the sidewalk, to the inside edge of the sidewalk on the other side. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is when I look at the report from the Finance Committee on Fiscal Impact, it says there's no impact, and that's what I found hard to believe. If you're doing complete streets and you're changing the curb kind, it seemed to me that there would indeed be a very big fiscal impact.
Alderman, is that the fiscal impact associated with this legislation? Or is that the fiscal impact associated with something else?
Well, I think it's associated with this legislation only in that we're talking about putting in a new curb type. As you said, I'm glad you brought it up and you correctly pointed out to us. If you're putting in a new curb type, you're putting in a new curb type. You're not having straight up and down mixed in with angular curves, although I suppose the turtles could find their way over to the slanted curbs, but that's why I questioned when I saw the fiscal impact. If we're going to slanted curbs, we're going to slanted curves. We're not going to have a mix and match. And, immediately warning bells went off in my head that the fiscal impact can't be correct. Because I think you have correctly brought to our attention that it would be replacing the square curbs or leaving the square curbs in place and only replacing the curbs where they're broken and presumably with this new kind of slanted curb. I would suggest that there are some aesthetics to that might be objectionable as well. So, Mr. Chair, I think we have now the anthill has now uncovered a mountain that we're going to need to get more discussion with the staff, and I would ask that we set up with the city manager and the director of public works a meeting sometime in the near future to come back to an understanding of what are complete streets, but also what does this legislation actually mean in practice if we're only replacing segments of curb here and there as they need repair rather than replacing curbs. I was going to suggest we don't have very many box turtles in Ward 8, so we may need to import them from your ward. But now it sounds like there's some real question about where these curbs are going to go.
Well, so I think there's some confusion over what the legislation does. I mean, so first of all, it requires it on any new construction, new curb. But the question I think you're concerned about is how it's going to apply to existing curb. And that's where that number 2, it's going to be up to, I didn't want to dig into that too much, leaving that up to the discretion of staff to determine their own policy as far as when and how they would replace existing curb. Because you're right. I don't think the department would want piecemeal 100 feet of this, 100 feet of that. I mean, I have seen that on some streets in the county, but I think there needs to be a plan to how it gets replaced, and that's why I don't know how they might do it, but they might suggest
That's what it would look like. You'd have the regular square curbs, and if they're replacing by this.
They'd transition, and it's a smooth transition, but it's going to be up to the department if they replace it only when, maybe it's only when they have 250 feet, or maybe it's only when they have a whole block face that they're replacing. They have to replace with a new curbing, but that's, again, kind of left up to their own internal procedures and policies that they want to draft. I mean, this sets the standard. Again, I don't want to necessarily get into that level of detail with it.
Well, we're going to. As soon as these start to show up in the neighborhood, there are going to be questions about why are my curbs still the old curb, and down the street the new curbs are a new kind of curb, and then there's this transition. Frankly, this is why we have committee meetings, and why I'm glad that Mr. Bryce is here, because we really needed to find this out.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that's best addressed in the code, or I think it's best addressed in some internal policy and standards.
Wait till you see the first slanted curbs go in, matched up with the old square curbs.
But that's like with anything. When you put in a new storm drain system, a new sidewalk, anything, a new pipe, it's all has to comply with our standards that we have for construction standards. Standards and specifications, and I know that those are what you look at. So that's where you'd have to address lights, and those are not detailed in the code usually. I think we may have some random stormwater standards in the code, but typically that's done.
When I read
Separately.
this, it says, when you're replacing curbs, curbs shall consist of slanted slope curbs or angled curbs or another type that allow turtles.
Yeah.
That's wherever you're replacing it. I have all kinds of broken curbs in the ward that get triaged. Whenever we go through and do repaving in any neighborhood, including mine, they replace the curb only where the curb is broken. And they replace it in kind, which is the traditional straight up and down curb. My interpretation of this, and maybe it's my misinterpretation, is henceforth, when they're repairing a curb, they will put it in with these turtle-friendly curbs. And as Sam points, they won't do a straight run. They only replace the curb where it's broken, which means where the curb isn't broken, the old curb, non-turtle-friendly curb, will remain in place. That, besides, the turtle has to now find their way to a driveway cut or some other curb, but also, I think, really raises some questionable aesthetics about how the street's going to look with all of this higgly-piggly, some of this, some of that kind of curbing. So,
Well, I mean, what's the alternative or solution to that? I mean, that'd be to write something in here that would say, for existing curb, that if a section of curb is going to be replaced, then the whole block would need to get replaced and
well, and we need
to
to
meet the
have
new
more.
standard.
And that,
I mean,
and I think that will have costs. And that's why my original question stemmed from there's no fiscal impact. If there's no fiscal impact, it doesn't sound to me like we're really doing what this says, which is in fact replacing the existing curbs with turtle-friendly curbs. And it can be one or the other, but I don't see how it can be both. Mr. Bryce, am I misconstruing that you can have mix and match?
It is the will of the council we deal with, okay? I don't think you want to try to mix slanted curbs with barrier curbs, the straight up and down curbs. I go back to what I had said earlier. When I reviewed, and this is my recollection, and I probably looked at this back in early October or maybe even September, I do not believe that paragraph was in there. And I could be wrong. I just don't believe that. And I think that probably ties into the fiscal impact statement as it was originally proposed. I believe, and again, I could be wrong, it was a development process. You put these in connection with a development, so the city, as a city cost, there is no fiscal impact. If we are going
So
to...
you mean new developments?
New development, correct, because it's the city requires that certain types of curb in new construction along non-arterial city-owned or maintained streets. Our interpretation, when I read that, was it was in connection with development. And in fact, one of my comments that I made when I looked at this, and that was an internal discussion, was in the critical areas, I don't think you're going to see that many new developments. It's going to be very isolated. I do not think that we ever interpreted this to be something that would be applying to our repair and maintenance of the other city streets. And so again, there would have been viewed that as there would be no fiscal impact to the city because it would be on new work.
Right.
Okay?
So my review of it, and we need to ask the sponsor, was that whenever we were doing our routine repaving, where at the same time we triage curbs and sidewalks, that we would be moving to these kinds of turtle-friendly curbs so that eventually the entire city, because every 20 years, we repave every street, that the entire city would become turtle-friendly curbs. If it's only for new developments, I think the new developments largely kill off all the turtles. So we're not doing anybody any favor. The only
Yeah.
point I make, I'm not
No,
trying to be.
I understand
Yeah.
what you're saying. I mean, but that's what I tried to address with that number 2, as far as the director developing a new construction schedule for replacing existing curb. So maybe at this point, though, maybe, we could postpone and maybe get some proposals from the department as far as language, what your policy would be as far as replacing existing curb, or what policy you would recommend, and then we would have to decide whether or not we'd want to amend that into this, or just have it adopted as an internal rule and reg. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I think until we see it, then we can determine, I think, whether or not we want to make it a part of the code or not. And I see your point as far as, depending on what the policy is, that could potentially have a cost as far as, because it sounds like, Mr. Bryce, you don't necessarily, when you do a resurfacing, that doesn't necessarily include the sidewalk and curb, or it depends on the extent of it.
When we do resurfacing, as far as the curb goes, if there is damaged curb that needs to be replaced, we cut out and replace that curb. We also, if the handicap ramps do not meet standards, we replace those handicap ramps. However, if there is good curb in place, we leave the curbing. We do not, good curb, we do not attempt to work, we do not pull out good curb just to pull out good curb. Because very honestly, curbing is expensive. Just as sidewalk is expensive. And as I think Alderman Arnett knows, we probably came into, Eastport was the first place we went into doing sidewalk repairs. And that was about 10 years, probably 12 or 13 years ago we started that, because we started out with First Street to 3rd was the first group of sidewalks we did. And we repaired all of the bad sidewalk we had out there, both on those streets as well as on Severn, Chesapeake, Chester, and Eastern. And we are back in there, coming back in to repair other ones that have now, over the last 12 years, had problems, spalled, raised up. So it's an ongoing process. And we do, in many cases, the sidewalks separate from repaving the streets. They're treated a little bit differently. Sometimes we tie those together, but they're actually treated separately from the repaving of the streets.
They are, and it's done on a triage basis. And just to remind, Alderwoman Finlayson knows, but this has a long, complicated history, sidewalks. Because years ago, we wanted to put in a $25 annual fee to replace sidewalks on a routine basis. And the code right now says if your sidewalk needs replacement, it's on you, the homeowner. And actually the city can come in and require you to do it. They don't in Eastport because the sidewalks are 100 years and 200 years old, and they're in such disrepair. Plus also, not every resident can afford to make a sidewalk repair. So it's been in limbo. There was a hue and cry. It was probably the best deal the council ever wanted to give the residents of the city of Annapolis. For a low $25 a year, you could get your sidewalks replaced and brought up to this par. but it ended up sort of being left in limbo. But this does bring into question a lot of things, including Peninsula Eastport is not the only one getting new gas lines and new water mains. It's going to be migrating throughout the city. And so I think that there's a lot of things that we need to get sorted out about what's happening with curbs and sidewalks.
Well, it's going to be really tough to put a fiscal, to quantify it because, Mr. Bryce just said for some of these projects, we get money from BGE. And presumably that's based on some kind of estimate as far as what it's going to cost us to repave the road.
And that is primarily, and I'm working from memory here, we require that they temporarily patch the road, and we require that they repair any sidewalks or curbs that they damage, because we've got such a long lead time on these things. For example, if you look at, a very good example of this is you look at Church Circle. South Street, Church Circle, that's been going on for about 2.5 years, and it will not be finished probably for another year and a half, because we've also tied in the traffic signals with that. But the infrastructure, we've got a very old infrastructure, and it's in need of repair. But if you're looking at something where it's between when you put in the gas main and I come back to finally resurface it, well, I can drive on a temporary patch. I don't want to have the pedestrians walking on a temporary patch for 2 years. So they are doing the repairs, the concrete repairs, and they are doing the temporary, and by temporary, this is a permanent temporary patch. So they're not going with cold mix, they're going with hot mix. And so it's a patch that is we expect multiple years out of. And then we are coming back in and putting in a smooth surface with our paving program, as well as, again, repairing any damaged curb that they did not have and doing any damaged sidewalk that they did not cause. But they're giving us money to do the paving.
Alderwoman?
I don't mean to interrupt, Mr. Bryce. What if we only, I'm trying to salvage your legislation. So what if we only left it for new construction and construction that was impacted by something like a BG&E replacement or something like that? And we could separate out what would eventually be all curbs in the city of Annapolis. Does that make sense? No.
The last part I didn't quite follow.
Well, the discussion I'm hearing is Alderman Arnett has just raised the issue that eventually all of our curbs in the city would be turtle-friendly curbs.
In the critical area.
In the critical area. And that could be massive.
Yeah.
And that's why we can't come up with a cost for it, because we don't know what that massive is. But what if we only said for new construction? And that would be fine because there's no fiscal impact, because the developer bears the responsibility of that cost.
Yeah, and
as a start. I mean, you can come back later and do more, but I'm just trying to figure out how to salvage this piece of legislation and make your son happy with the turtles. I'm just saying, I had to put the big turtle back up because I like seeing that better than the box turtle. So I'm just saying.
So I think we may need to do that, but if the committee would be willing to postpone, because I think it'd be good because I think we might be able to craft some language. I mean, the fiscal impact is, again, really going to be tough because they're the replacements that BG contributes. If you're talking about capital improvement projects, that'd be much easier to quantify. Although if it's a CIP, it's most likely going to be replacing all the curb anyway. But the routine, regular programmed resurfacing, sidewalk replacement, that also is going to be hard to quantify because it's not that it's not that this is going to require us to pay more. And this budget's still going to be whatever that is, 2.5 million for resurfacing. What it's going to change is we might have a little bit less miles we can replace, right? Because the money is going to be not going to be going as far, because a little bit more of it's going to be spent on replacing more curb than otherwise we would have replaced. So I don't know how exactly we quantify that as far as a fiscal impact.
But let me ask a question. When we are in the budget process, and I remember Ms. Patrick coming and giving us the data on how many streets we repave, how many, I thought, sidewalks, and how many curbs we replace. That's part of her budget
Sidewalks.
presentation, at least when she was acting DPW director, I believe. So somewhere those numbers have to exist,
Right.
because
So
we accepted what she presented to us.
years ago, when you and I were both in the Finance Committee, we moved from $2 million a year, which would resurface all the streets in the city every 30 years, to $3 million, because the expected life of streets is only 20 years. So it didn't make sense to under budget the resurfacing of the streets. Separately, we have $600,000 a year for sidewalks, and that has been primarily sidewalk repairs, even though, and this is when you and I were in public safety together, sidewalks are
What committee have we not been on? I mean,
sidewalks
really?
are a public safety issue in communities, and it's right on my street on Chesapeake, where there are no sidewalks, and so mothers in their perambulators are out in the street. And so,
Perambulators, really?
all right, baby carriages, whatever. So I don't think we've ever fully, as a council, had a focus on all of these things, which I think are very much quality, day-to-day quality of life issues, potholes, sidewalk disrepair, no sidewalks, and so forth. And so in many ways, I'm glad this legislation is bringing this to the fore. I don't think this legislation can address the larger issues, but I do think we need to have a meeting arranged by the city manager to get to these issues before this coming year's budget, because these are really important issues, and they're expensive. As Mr. Bryce says, a whole run of new curb, it may well be as expensive as resurfacing the whole street.
Well, I am good with postponing action on
I second that motion.
5222
Until
until the next meeting.
Okay, all those in favor of postponing,
Aye.
please say aye.
Aye.
And I think my son's going to tell Santa to put some coal in your stocking after this. Awesome. All right. So, but Mr. Bryce, I think you get the gist of some of the questions of the committee. Could you?
I will relay those on to David,
And I think
to Director Gerald.
to help provide clarity on a response, maybe, I guess if you could relay that, is I think the standard that we would possibly consider writing into this would be if a street or sidewalk are being completely resurfaced or replaced, that the associated curb would also need to be replaced with this new curbing along with that. And so that's the cost, indirect or direct, I suppose, that we would, I think, want to get a better understanding of. So if the department could help us clarify that
Yes.
with the finance or whoever, I think that'd be good to talk about next meeting.
We can do that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
One last question.
May I ask one question?
Yes, please.
Is that a snapping turtle?
I was going to ask that same thing. It sure looks like it.
If you ask your question, if it's a snapping turtle,
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that one is, yeah.
Yeah.
that is a big
Right.
snapping turtle.
Well,
I always think of when I was much younger, catching a snapping turtle in a crab net and then putting in a garbage can to take up to show to our In fact, it wasn't a garbage can. We put into just a basket to carry up to show my father, and thinking now, knowing that was one of the really stupid things I did.
I was going to ask the same thing. And we actually found one, again, this was in Northern Virginia, and we stuck a shovel handle in its mouth. And I couldn't believe how deeply he bit into that hard oak, he or she. I mean, they're nasty critters. I don't want them up on my curb.
Mr. Chair,
I want to
this is
think
another
that, and I
subject.
think it was in Beautiful Swimmers, but it may have been in a different book I read at the same time, that if a snapping turtle bites you, it holds on until the sun goes down. So,
Yeah.
Or you get it in the soup pot.
yeah.
Well, the other picture, I thought that was a snapping turtle, the one with the turtle on the street.
It was,
That was a box
that was a
turtle.
box. And
Oh,
then-
that's a box
And then the
turtle.
one in the hand, I think, is a painted,
That looks like a
painted
painted,
turtle.
yeah.
Okay.
because we do have, it's the little babies that cross the street.
Well, you need to teach them how to read so they know where the crosswalks are. I'm just saying. Mr. Bryce, I have another question I'd like for you to take back to your department. Because as we were discussing this, and I'm looking up at our ceiling, which still has what looks like mold to
Are
me.
you looking up at the ceiling?
But
You said you were looking up at the ceiling?
that's correct.
Okay.
And I would like for you to look up at the ceiling to see what looks like mold. They've said it's dust, and they assured us that someone was going to be here to clean this, and that's been well over a month.
Okay.
So would you please put that
I
on
will ask
somebody's
that question.
radar?
I will ask that question.
And I think we should have it tested, because I just think that maybe it needs to be tested.
And it also looks like over here, we need some curb work done. Looks like it's got some
So-
moisture there.
Yeah.
So thank you, Mr. Bryce.
Okay.
You have something else
Yeah,
to
and
take back.
we do appreciate your expertise and your patience with our questions.
Okay. Thank you.
We can,
And,
we can do-
as we approach holiday seasons, Merry Christmas.
Same to you.
thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. And just so we can have questions for everything here. All right, next on the agenda, I have Mr. Rao, thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to invite you forward. Do you have an update from the commission, Environmental Commission?
Greetings. Hello. My name is Randy. Hello. I'm the chair for the City of Annapolis Environmental Commission. Randy Rao, Randy Kenyatta Rao Jr. And I'm here to give a report for you all. I did send an email. Apologize for the lateness. I've been out for a few days for my birthday. It was yesterday. And I just kind of got back into the flow of things today. So I did get that email, and what I did was I just shared with you our November agenda and our minutes from September. So I'm sure in your spare time you can check that out, kind of get an update on things. But in the email I sent, I just plan on just kind of walking through that.
Okay.
And so one.
What's it doing?
So the first thing that, new business, just we're looking to take a break in December, so we're not going to have a meeting this month. Let people have a holiday break. So we'll look to get things back going again in January, and we will have our January 5th, 16th. We have been asked to provide our annual report by then, so we'll be looking to have that finalized. If you all would like to see a draft of that and add some feedback, you're more than welcome to that as well. And also, we're looking to get 3 new candidates sworn in or accepted by the council for the Environmental Commission. Apparently those 3 have already been identified. I'm just waiting to hear what the status is from Hillary on those 3 individuals and when they will be, I guess, brought to you all, I guess, to...
We had one today,
Okay,
which
that's
we
great.
recommended.
Awesome, great. I had asked in our last meeting, because we talked about this, if there's any way I can find out or know who they are or what their names or emails so that I could make contact with them and invite them to the next meeting to announce themselves or, get them in the fold of, commission activities.
Mr. Chair, I would hope that that would be part of the process, that the committee chair would be made aware of candidates that are being recommended.
Yeah, I made, thank you.
May I
I
jump
made
in, Randy? I'm Jackie Geil, Deputy City Manager for Resilience and Sustainability. So that is a good question because I had raised it many years ago about whether I could see those applications. And at one time I was told, they like to keep it separate, the review process separate from the board or commission and the staff liaisons. And I didn't completely agree with that, but that's the way that it was done, and it still is being done. However, now the community ombudsman does come to me with potential applicants, and I do review them and make a recommendation on them. But the particular board or commission is still not seeing them. That's still not part of the process.
Well, we can make the request of you because you get them. To share them, and we will make that request to Ms. Raftovich also.
And I can follow up with Hillary to make sure that you're getting the new people's names and addresses. They should go to you right away. So
Yeah, I'm not so much interested in seeing their application information or details or truly anything before they are sworn in, really, or accepted or nominated, or but it's just more so after they've been kind of, accepted, then at that point I would like to get,
Well, at least before it comes before a committee, because that means that someone has reviewed their application and considered them a viable candidate.
Yeah, and most often, I have an idea, because I'm probably, most often, like this one we've talked beforehand, so sometimes I have an idea, but it would be nice to know, yes.
Alderman Renee?
Actually, in the past, it's been kind of a partnership. We expect committees to be self-replenishing, but also when alderpersons identify somebody that seems like they could be a good candidate, in the past, I've referred them to the committee chair. I believe in team approaches, so it shouldn't fall on any one person. I think we ought to try to do our best to keep these boards and commissions full. It's hard to do sometimes, and particularly for the more technical boards, like, say, the Board of Appeals. But, yeah, gosh, I would hope you would know who's out and about and who we're seeing, because I guess it's, in my view, it is within the prerogative of the chair of each of these commissions to say, you don't think it's a good fit?
Yeah.
Or you had other people in mind and you're full up before this one came along. But again, I think it ought to be a teamwork kind of a process.
Yeah. So moving on. One thing that we really have been trying to do with the commission is really build a closer relationship with commissions and boards within the city that have environmental scope or impacts that relate to the environment, as well as with the state and the county as well. Matthew Johnston and a few others used to, work with us, but we're trying to make a more concerted effort to have different representation at our meetings from these different various departments and other neighboring state, our state county offices that relate to the environment. And the main reason why is that we really want to coordinate a lot of our legislation recommendation or our outreach, or even, our environmental impact vulnerabilities. We want to really learn what the county's top 3 issues are that they're prioritizing, as well as the state, as well as the city, so that we can coordinate some of these efforts and kind of not so much work in silos, but because as we all know, our environmental issues do not kind of stop at our county lines and state. They affect us all. Our waterways kind of, they work in sync with all of our different local governments. So I don't know how to really encourage that. Maybe that could be encouraged by you all's, from you all's platform, to identify some of those offices and leads and working with us to get them scheduled to come in and make a kind of regular reports to us on some environmental aspects of what some of the challenges may be, things like that. I guess the goal would be to try to see if we can align some of the city's activities and recommendations with the county and the state as well, so that we can all kind of be on the same sheet of music, if that makes sense. So that's another thing. I'm sure you all fine with that. As far as the new stormwater director, we would like to invite her to come and speak at our next meeting in February. So if somebody maybe want to, let her know or make that mention, but we'd love to have her come in and talk about what her vision and her future aspirations are around stormwater management, and seeing how we can, again, align some of our activities and make sure that we are encouraging her activities as well with what we're trying to do, so we can help her as best we can.
Have you extended an invitation to her as?
I believe I did verbally. I don't think I've done it in email yet. I don't have her email, but if somebody could shoot me that at some point, that'd be great.
I can do that.
Who's the liaison for?
Racine is our liaison. So all those requests can go through Racine Hoto.
Okay.
She's our staff liaison, for, as you know.
All right, cool.
Yeah, so the liaisons should be helping you with any kind of connection you need to make with staff or city resources.
And I'll check with her. She may have even given it to me already since our last talk. So that's something we want to do. And again, just trying to make sure we are aligning as best we can with the city's plans in regards to stormwater management and things like that, and seeing how we can encourage, whether it be through outreach or spreading advocacy in word, or even just getting some data that may be critical for her to do her job. Personally, I would love to see how we can help her create some data around our urban low-income communities, stormwater management issues, and seeing if we can help prioritize those communities that are most vulnerable to climate change and sea level rise mitigation, so that maybe in her new role, that could be prioritized and some cool projects could be developed around that, as well as with some of the new buildings as they come up with public works and other facilities, or as well as the new garage and different things. So
yeah, and you might be able to work with Sean Wampler or GIS, as I'm just thinking about how to do that. She might be able to map out areas that are vulnerable to, for example, I don't know, just throwing out a number, vulnerable to 5-foot level sea level rise, and then just looking at, because we're small enough, I think we know which neighborhoods are going to be lower income or most in need. So and then if we have a stormwater layer, we can put over top of that to see if there's stormwater infrastructure or drainage issues that coming out of that would need to be looked at. So that might be something that the commission could do with the GIS, but also in conjunction with Public Works.
So we already have that in the Army Corps of Engineers. They've shown where those areas are, and it had to do with that getting the the flood insurance and getting that, if you get it, you get that write-off on your insurance. But I think and Sean did work on that when we were doing weather together. So she should have that pretty readily handy.
Yeah.
Good. Sounds good.
So, yeah, maybe if the commission wants to do a roundtable discussion, that might be one approach to invite all these folks together and see what their ideas are for, because I think, like Alderman Arnett said, we may have a lot of those analyses done already. Just a matter of looking at each of them. And
Okay. And speaking right to that topic, we're looking to try to encourage or get some development around some type of most vulnerable climate resiliency fund. And that would be for people who are most vulnerable to climate change and activities that result from that. And most vulnerable would be, of course, people who are less fortunate or don't have access to the same amount of resources, and seeing if the commission can encourage the city to or other partners to create some kind of fund, whereas if some type of natural disaster or some kind of large flooding event happens, we would have a fund that they could access or use for minimal needs for living and housing or stipends or things that they may need for transportation or whatever guys it can put under it. But this is something that we've been thinking about in regards to our climate resiliency plan and our efforts to make our city more.
yeah, that's a compelling idea. I think it's a good idea. So maybe setting up some kind of fund associated with our resilience work that could go towards recovery of certain communities. Yeah, it's a good idea.
We see a lot of reports say that, even Katrina was a case study example of that. And a lot of times the government organizations have a less ability of transferring these resources to communities that need it most. And most often grassroots organizations or faith-based organizations have a lot more accessibility to reach those who need it most. So
maybe we could invite Director Simmons, because I'm sure he knows resources and organizations that would be there to provide that support.
I think just identifying the communities that may need additional resources. We have not been paid much attention at all to communities like Clay Street, as the damage that could happen if there is a catastrophic, or even not catastrophic, but we think about City Dock and we think about Eastport, but those aren't our only communities, and particularly those communities with those that have the least amount of resources have no option for recovery, let's just say.
with this new funding that's been coming down with these different blue and green infrastructure bills and the Maryland Conservation Finance Act of 2022, the first state in the nation to pass such legislation, we just really want to try to see how we can encourage some of these funds to go into the right places to replace some of these great infrastructure with blue and green infrastructure, and using environmental sustainability as a means to not only just help the environment, but also, help people in communities as well. So kind of a win-win situation, but addressing that funding opportunities, which is a lot of funds available at this moment in time, and making sure we can try to advocate that these funds kind of go where they may best be needed at, versus, say, for example, replacing great infrastructure that is not necessarily in an area or a region that has been struggling from lack of resources. And looking at some of those places that have been struggling from kind of disinvestment and using those green and blue infrastructure replacement of great infrastructure funds to kind of boost up those communities as well. So And then, lastly, we'll continue to provide recommendations and reviews of things like the Public Water Access Plan, as well as the Gateways Project that Eric Wyszynski's been kind of spearheading. He came and spoke last time at our meeting, so he's been very helpful in kind of laying out the details. And then also looking at different internship programs that have environmental programs that the city or other partners can partner with, and using these interns that can gather research that can make the case for some of the environmental outcomes that the city may want to put out. One of those examples is the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, the C-Stream program, which is an internship program for people of color, underserved populations, and first-generation college students for environmental careers, jobs with the federal government throughout the Chesapeake Bay Partnership. So it'd be like NOAA, EPA, organizations like that. So I just know that the city has a very robust and very extensive plan for our environment, especially in with the future to come, whether it's the downtown redevelopment or some of these other water access sites. So it would be nice to be able to gather some research that could speak to some of those new developments that could be done. A good example of that would be what took place with Carr's Beach and Vince Leggett and Blacks of the Chesapeake. And they had an intern from the Smithsonian, the C-Stream program last summer. And their whole job was to gather a collection of photos and video to create data that would showcase life along the Chesapeake Bay over the last 100, 200 years. So that kind of detail and information is good for things like grants and funding for large-scale development that could be needed for some of these developments and some of these more underserved communities, because a lot of times they don't have the data from these communities, whether it's energy, whether it's how safe they feel about a disaster, environmental disaster happening, or kind of what their daily challenges are, whether it be through mold and air quality or having safe places to recreation at. So that's about it. We're trying to, just myself recently, I've been working with the Alliance of the Chesapeake Bay. They have a program that deals with promoting environmental careers at HBCUs. And so they've been having dinner and dialogue discussions at Bowie State, where they bring in environmental professionals from climate change professions and different walks of the environmental field to directly engage with students from their environmental programs, and basically showcasing and letting them see, touch, and feel people who are in the profession that could give insight and input to them. And I thought that may be something cool to do with the city. Maybe do an event at Pip Moyer. We have a 1-year event we try to host for the commission, I believe, and we're looking to possibly do a working session with the city council and directors of different various groups, departments in the city, to talk about best practices, future plans, looking at training, whether it's cultural competency or how to engage with different diverse communities, or even just understanding the environmental challenges that some of these different communities face. But that's something that we'd like to also discuss, maybe having it at Pip Moyer, maybe 6 months from now, around summertime, or towards the end of the summer, something like that. So that's something else we're just in discussion about. So.
All right.
But enough about us. What are you all's? I would love to hear. And this is something that I wanted to ask each of you all. And we've asked you all before, kind of what you all think your top 3 environmental challenges are in your wards or what your constituents are coming to you and mostly sharing about, so that we can take that information and kind of try to work behind the scenes to carry out some of those activities as well.
Does anybody have any comments?
Sea level rise,
Okay,
tree canopy, and stormwater.
gotcha.
And tree canopy, I think, is particularly urgent, and I think that it is incumbent on the council to change the code about cutting down trees, because right now, we allow people to cut down any tree whatsoever in the rear, and I've seen just on my street, 3 specimen trees go down in the last 2 weeks. And we also really let people cut down trees in the front yard with a replacement schedule, but it takes a long time for that tree to grow up and become the carbon sink and also the provider of clean air and temperate moisture. So it is a real quality of life. But those are big issues, and they are very much on the minds of the constituents all the time.
Well, NASA has a new program, they announced maybe a year or so ago, where they have a satellite where they're able to track the height and life of tree canopies. And it's pretty impressive. And I can look into that, check it out, but maybe that would be something wise to maybe show and use for constituents to give them an understanding of where the challenges are, where places that could stand for some restoration at. And also the state has a new initiative. I think it's called the 5 Million Trees Initiative. I think her name is I can't remember her name, but it's a pretty large program that they're running right now, which deals with basically planting as many trees. And Anne Arundel County is it's got the most amount of tree canopy loss in the state of all counties. So it's kind of like ground zero. Huh?
University of Vermont also does aerial photographs and this kind of analysis on a regular basis.
Cool. And maybe Navy. Navy is here. Navy has a lot of high tech, capabilities. Maybe they're able to assist in some of these surveys and analysis as well as it relates to our environment. I'm pretty sure that they'd be willing to partner or support in that manner.
All right, Alderwoman, did you have something you wanted to?
I had a couple of questions about
Sure.
what was on your agenda. The plastic bag ban memo. Is there legislation in the legislature? I heard something this morning about them taking this up again
In the state?
at the state level. And I don't remember what county was actually speaking to it. But did you guys take a position on pending legislation on banning plastic bags?
Yes, we sent you all over that, and I guess right now it's in you all's lap to, I guess, review it and make a decision, a determination on it. I think that's where we left off at it with Allison Colden, our vice chair, who sent that through.
Yeah, and Ms. Kalen, could you add that on a future agenda discussion about the recommendations from the commission on the plastic bag legislation? We did receive that. Haven't had a
I'm
chance
not
to
sure
dig
what,
into it
maybe
yet.
that's what I saw
Yeah.
recently.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that could have been what I saw.
Yeah, and
Early
so,
this morning.
but that's what does, and we would love to hear, well, maybe there's some other legislation bans, types discussions, but we'd love to.
Did it come from you?
Yeah,
Allison
I think so.
Colden.
Oh, Allison
Allison Colden. Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, thank you for that. And we'll have to think more about timing wise as far as when it might make sense to introduce that. with the economy, what it is, I'm not quite sure, but there is some legislation that will be introduced, some on Monday actually, that the commission may want to take a look at. I'll make a motion to refer it officially to the commission. One of them deals with overhauling the sediment and erosion control inspection process and creates what we're calling milestone inspections. And so we'd love to have your feedback on that.
Sure.
That's
And
in
then
response to some of the issues we've been having. And because that's one of the probably big issues in my ward, especially right now, is enforcement on many different levels as far as.
and that kind of goes back to the city's capacity, right? As far as hiring somebody who can be more involved in the enforcement process. Is that one of the challenges in that, right? I've heard.
Yeah, and I think now that we have a more robust and fully staffed stormwater program in the city, I think that's going to help a lot. But the legislation just kind of clarifies and establishes new inspection procedures and requirements in light of some of the problems we've had in the past with some of the contractors. So is there anything else?
That was the only thing looking at the other document. Nope, that's the same one.
I would like to make sure we have time for Ms. Guild.
Can I just make a quick comment? Bags are bad. It's not just plastic bags. When the council spent a lot of time years ago having a debate between banning plastic bags versus paper bags, and Alderman Shropshire gave us a lot of information about how bad plastic bags were, but it was all coming from universities in Sweden in particular, but Scandinavia, and that's because they produce a lot of wood pulp for paper bags. But producing paper is also very damaging to the environment. And we never were able to come to an agreement other than we thought the best thing is for people to bring their own bags, neither paper nor plastic, but reusable bags. But I think we need to get back into thinking about this whole issue for sure.
Yeah, and I think we should save that discussion for, because that's potentially a big conversation about plastic bag. Is there any?
No,
Did you have any environmental issues in your ward that you wanted, or did you already mention that?
I do not. I was sitting here trying to think of what's specific to my ward, and nothing particular.
Okay.
Water access, is that an issue?
Water access, is that an issue? There are only a couple of spots in there. We have a new pier in one, and there's the Church Creek project that's still going on, so.
Cool.
Yeah, nothing that I can put my finger on at
Okay.
this time.
Well, we got the communication happening with, I think her name is Kaylin. Is that you? Okay, nice to meet you. So hopefully I'll be coming regularly here with the invite and knowing when they are. That way we can get this information to you all and keep the ball rolling.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Rao, for joining us today.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Guild,
Thank
do you have
you.
any update from?
Randy, you might want to stick around. I might be able to answer some of your questions.
Sure.
I think I need to pay a visit to the Environmental Commission. I haven't been in several meetings. They've conflicted with other meetings that I've had because I think that they will benefit from update from me on what's going on with the city as far as environmental and resilience and sustainability initiatives. I will go back to producing my spreadsheet for both this committee and the commission on a monthly basis. I think when we run out of time or when we don't touch every issue, at least you can see the long list of issues we're working on and projects we're working on, and some that we're coordinating with other departments in the city. I think that'll be helpful. Going back, I just want to go touch on a couple of things that have been brought up. Regarding Betsy, I sent you, Mr. Rao, Betsy McEwen, who's the stormwater program manager's information, so you could invite her to a meeting. And this city has gone back and reprioritized its stormwater projects and its stream restoration projects in a line with addressing communities, first of all, that are most vulnerable to stormwater and sea level rise issues, and secondly, to those who do not have stormwater controls in place because they predated it or they are outdated stormwater controls. And then third, the other prioritization element was underserved communities, historically disadvantaged communities. So that's something that Department of Public Works has already built in, but Ms. McEwen can provide you further information on that and projects they're working on right now. And then to Alderwoman Finlayson's point about it's anyone in the city addressing green roofs and other green and blue and gray infrastructure projects, that would be me and Racine. That's part of our mandate, is to look at all projects the city has, their capital improvement projects, as well as all developments. That review process goes through my staff and me, and we make comments and provide comments to Department of Planning, Zoning, and Public Works on projects. And everything is viewed with the resilience lens. Every project, such as Hillman Garage, 39 Hudson Street, and City Dock, on what kind of gray, green, and blue infrastructure could we put in to add resilience, add sustainability, do carbon sequestration, reduce the urban heat island effect, just environmental improvement, quality of life, health improvements. Every project goes through that review. Not all my recommendations are accepted. I do know that there were several green aspects incorporated into both Hillman Garage and 39 Hudson, based on recommendations that I made and Racine made. Some things I ran into with City Dock and Hillman were, well, that's going to cost too much, or that doesn't fit the budget. But I do think that's a rather short-sighted response sometimes from our planners that we have. I'm not talking about city staff. I'm talking about some of the companies that we've hired to do our work, that they need to look at it for, to not be penny wise and pound foolish, because I think a lot of these resilience, green infrastructure aspects you can incorporate will pay long-term dividends. We're trying to get more green space into Hillman Garage, and some of that was shot down. Some of the recommendations we make regarding like permeable pavers do not work well within city limits because of our soils. We have a lot of clay and other soils that do not work well with permeable pavers, so it really is not worth doing. But we make that recommendation every time so that the engineers involved can look at those aspects and see if they work. We're always trying to build in green roofs, solar, and drainage, stormwater drainage, especially downtown where we don't have it. And then there was, let me see if there's another comment. I think I hit everything that Randy or anybody else might have brought up. Just want to tell you that the Military Installation Resilience Review is wrapping up. Our final report will be drafted in December.
Which report did you
This
say?
is the Military Installation Resilience Review,
okay.
the joint resilience review done by Naval Support Annapolis, Anne Arundel County, and the City of Annapolis. The City of Annapolis is the project lead. I'm the project leader for it. So Stantec will provide its final report and recommendations by January. They're going through the drafting process now, gathering some last minute data from the Naval Academy and the installation in general. And I'm thinking, at first I thought it would be good to do a work session with City Council and have them present their findings and recommendations. But it's a joint effort between NSA, the city, and the county. So I'm rethinking that as whether it should be a better presentation to the Resilience Authority, because the Resilience Authority will be tasked with coming up with funding mechanisms for some of the recommendations, or whether it should be Resilience Authority, city, county, and NSA. So that, because they're our partners, but the Resilience Authority will be tasked with implementing solutions. All four entities may need to be brought into a presentation. I'm not asking Stantec to make 4 separate presentations because I don't want to use their money that way, the money that we have left. But I'm going to give that a little thought. Any feedback that you have for me on that, how we should present the findings to the jurisdictions that are involved will be helpful.
Yeah. So this will be the findings of Stantec?
Stantec, yes, based on the work that they did with city staff and other stakeholders, including our utilities, hospital, emergency management, state, regional, and city, county, and NSA.
So the needs associated with the expansion of the Navy?
No, it's not an expansion. It's all about building resilience and addressing the challenges that we have, protecting our most vulnerable assets that are in the way of climate change and the path of climate change, while keeping the installation ready for its mission preparedness, mission readiness. So that's why we could get Department of Defense funds, because it revolves around mission readiness, mission preparedness. But no, looking at the NSA is, it's part of the city. They rub up against the county. So it's not insulated. It does have what we do in the city, such as the seawall and things we do at City Dock, impact what they do as far as their resilience planning, protecting their assets. So we're all, climate change doesn't respect our boundaries, our county and city boundaries. So that's why we looked at this from all three jurisdictions' perspective. So identified our most vulnerable assets and how we can protect them, as well as a signalization, transportation plan, and evacuation plan. That was a big part of it. So those will be the recommendations and findings that will be presented by Stantec.
Okay, so that's for the entire city, not just
It's not just the city.
downtown in particular.
Yeah, it's NSA and the county as well.
Okay, and so that's what Stantec is doing. Have they completed it?
So they're wrapping up right now their data collection and writing their report and recommendations. Their contract with the city and county goes through January, and so they have availability in January to make a presentation.
So have they presented to you the 60%, 90% plan, or is it just, are you only going to get to see the final?
I'm talking to them all along about what data is going into this. I do know what some of the vulnerable assets that I've identified and what plans to protect them roughly. So that will be further developed this month. We have a meeting this week. Things will get more concrete this week.
I mean, my thoughts, I don't know what the others might be to have them present to the council to get our thoughts before it's final, because then whatever gets presented to, I guess, DOD or whoever is the overall coordinating agency, we could at least then, at that point, say the council's already been consulted and...
Well, they will be wrapping up this month with the report. Mm-hmm. I can talk to them about whether they'd have a draft they could share before the end of the month.
Okay.
And before they make it final. So I'll put that on my list of things to do with Stantec this week.
I don't know if there'd be time to do it if there'd be time for them, if we add it to our agenda in January, if they're supposed to be completing it this month.
Their contract runs through the end of January.
Through the end of January.
Right.
Okay. So maybe what do you think about adding it to at least this committee's agenda for January?
Okay.
If there's enough money for them to give it, perhaps.
Yeah, I'll look at the
What
budget.
is the rest of the committee? Would you want to hear what's in the report that Stantec is putting together as far as detailing what city assets are, from their perspective, looking at the data, are most at risk and vulnerable to sea level rise?
And just so you know, it's not just environmental risks.
Yeah.
So there's sea level rise and things like that are impacting City Dock. That's obvious. City Dock's impacted in some low levels, and it has to be something that's contiguous to. So we're not looking at Eastport because it's not part of mission readiness. Not that it's not important to the city, but there's cybersecurity was a big part of the vulnerable assets that were identified, and also evacuation routes were really important. Roads, bridges, that kind of thing. So it's not just like traditional seashore, the shoreline protection or anything like that.
Okay. Is that something the committee might want to?
I think so. If they give us a report so that we can have some questions prepared,
Okay.
I think that might be helpful.
Yeah, yeah.
executive summary.
Yeah, Ms. Scott, if you could have them send us something, and then that'll help us figure out if.
Yeah,
but
okay.
tentatively, could you put it on the agenda for? Yeah,
Got it.
and maybe tentatively put it on our agenda for
Right.
January.
And I would think the environmental commission would also be included.
Yeah. Yep. I also had another question. If, say, for example, we were to ask, like, if your office could provide a list of potential green and blue infrastructure projects that could take place in and around, communities of color, for example, just as a region, could you all provide something like that? And if you couldn't readily, like, provide a report like that or something that would lay that out, is that something you'd be willing to maybe partner on some kind of feasibility study to create a white paper around that specific research?
Yeah, my suggestion would be go through Ms. Hodo, your liaison, and to see if she can pull together, Ms. Scott if needed, but Sean Wampler and Betsy McCowan, and maybe Ms. Scott if she wants, to see if they can get that information together, because I think those are the people who would.
You're talking about with vulnerable communities?
Yeah, so like,
overlaying the
'Cause we-
stormwater data with the.
We've got between Department of Public
Minorities.
Works projects and then Department of Planning and Zoning changes to building code. There's, as you said, we've done a number of studies. There's the cultural hazard mitigation study. We have a hazard mitigation plan that's almost done with OEM and has to be finished by March. We do it every 5 years. We update the hazard mitigation plan. There are multiple projects in public works, as I mentioned, so that would be, that's a project to pull it all together, but we can. And we can look at where vulnerable communities fit in within those plans.
it's kind of like a site map, right? So like, it would be kind of like, here are where potential projects, green and blue projects, could possibly take place.
Well, we know where projects are taking place and where projects are planned right now, and then we have target areas as well.
Okay,
So,
we only have 5 minutes. I mean, I want to try to end this around 5.
Yeah.
So my recommendation would be to invite Ms. Swampler and McCowan, or we could have a conversation with them over email
Sure.
about how
And-
best to get that data.
Also, just want to highlight for you that we do have our contractor, Climate Change Consulting, on board for developing a complete electric vehicle fleet strategic plan and implementation to start purchasing vehicles. Some initial work with our fleet manager. One obstacle I just want to let you know we're running into with purchasing electric vehicles is that, first, there are none available, and it makes it a little bit difficult to put in orders that cannot be guaranteed that will be filled within the fiscal year. We just have to extend. We might have something budgeted and we spend so many dollars within this fiscal year. We might not spend them. So we may be looking to extend those requests for spending. It's just what we're running into when our fleet manager goes to try to put it in order. He can't even put it in order with a guarantee that it will be delivered. And he is also running into that the dealerships are marking up these vehicles by $10,000 and more over MSRP. It doesn't mesh well with our procurement policies, and then so he tries to tag on to other jurisdictions, such as other counties that are already putting in an order. This is the supply chain we think will even out probably later in 2023, but it is making it really difficult to purchase electric vehicles right now. There are some hybrids that are already planned for purchase. They're a little bit easier to get. The police department did put in an order for 5 hybrid vehicles for their cruiser vehicles. So we're going to continue to see whether we can work with consortiums, purchasing, collaboratives to see if we can get more leeway there and getting more vehicles for our fleet without having to go to hybrids, because we need to be making them electric. So we're going to move forward with that, but I just wanted to make you aware of those obstacles. And then,
May I add something?
yes,
yes,
I'm trying to think of the meeting Dr. Dua attended and told us that he is piggybacking on Seattle, Washington's order.
yeah, and his,
And that is already in the works.
yes,
Because I-
that's for
because-
buses.
Because I asked, why are we piggybacking on Seattle so far out of it? But that's who is ordering the type of vehicle
Right.
Because we all get to go out there and drive the buses
and drive
back.
it back, right?
And he has-
And the fittest survives.
Yeah. And he has, in like 18 months, from that time that purchase order went in, still 18 months before we would get the vehicles. So he's running into the same kind of supply chain issue.
Right.
And-
So I wasn't questioning, I was
Yeah.
just saying that he has already shared with us the fact that he is working, he's got a partner already and placing the order. And I maybe it was finance who, where he presented that information to us, so.
But we were successful. You may have heard, we got those 2 GEM golf carts that we're using already. And those are for the trolley, call it a trolley or whatever you want to call it, but as, you know, for the 10-minute trolley to get around town, and used it for tonight for the Midnight Madness events. So you'll see that there's 2 of them. We were able to get them within 2 weeks. They were in stock. Marcus did a really good job of getting those for us. And we have a wrap that Mitchell has designed that says it's ride the current, it's electric. So promoting that these are electric they're basically golf carts.
Yeah.
The only thing is with those 2, I just want to just temper expectations. They have a charge life depending on how much weight they're carrying, and also temperatures, cold temperatures, high temperatures. You get a less time on your charge, obviously. And so there's about 5 hours on them. So we would have to go back and recharge those. And right now they are level 1, so they're plugins, and until we get the level 2 charger, so that we had to order the charging piece that would allow them to be level 2. And once we get those within the next couple of weeks, they'll charge a little bit faster.
Oh, yeah, a lot faster.
Yeah.
All right.
Can I get in 3 quick things? They're not, it's for the next time. I believe you said at the beginning, you're going to give us the update spreadsheet.
I'll give you the ahead of
Yeah,
time.
So that would update us on the WIP programs.
On all
of them,
programs.
right.
And that way you can have questions prepared on those, if any.
I'd like to know where we are with the Green Vest contract.
Public Works, Ms. McEwen mentioned yesterday during her presentation on
Right.
capital
We don't
improvements.
need to do it now.
Yeah, but they're renegotiating some of the work for 2023.
Okay. And then I'd like to get an update on where we are with the Resiliency Financing Authority. I know they've set up their board, they've got temporary people, but this morning I was going through a drawer and came across my Weather It Together button. And I'm wondering, whatever happened? We put in a lot of time.
I know.
And a major investment in that, and I think it is relevant to a lot of the environmental, particularly sea level. But just kind of a reminder of, should we be wearing that button again or not?
Yeah, and so actually, I just was speaking with John Tower yesterday about that and what we need to update it with regard to new information we have from the Department of the Interior and the sea level rise projections. Department of Interior just came out with some new recommendations and guidance that incorporates climate change impacts. John is going to share that with me. I haven't seen it yet. He just received it himself. And then regarding the Resilience Financing Authority, more to come on that, but they are meeting next Thursday, and David Gerald and I are both on the advisory committee, and Michael Laplace, the non-voting advisory committee. So some work should actually start taking place as of next week.
Okay.
All right. Let's we can continue these conversations next meeting. Is there anything else from the committee?
I like the idea of our commission getting together with the county. We actually are part of the county. So whatever they're doing, we ought to be he partners with at a minimum.
Oh, let me just comment on that, because Randy raised that. When Matt Johnston was still with the county, he and I worked very regularly together on all initiatives so that we were, in step with one another, the city and the county. However, when he took the new position with Arundel Rivers, they did not refill his position. They just kind of redistributed among the different departments, different aspects of his job. And I worked with their planning and zoning and public works and their waterway restoration person, Eric Michelson. Instead, it is on my list now that we have the county executive reelected to touch base with them and see what they're going to do as far as environmental and resilience work and how I should communicate with the county going forward. So I'll let you know.
And-
I'll let the Environmental Commission know as well.
And electric vehicle work, I mean, it'd be nice if we could both get on a contract for that.
Right.
All right, so for next meeting I have on our list, we're going to be talking about the turtle curbing legislation again. We're talking about probably about legislation that's going to be introduced on Monday dealing with the sediment control inspections overhaul. And then we have on there also a discussion with Public Works about Spa Road and particularly the pollution, the contamination of that property and what it means as far as redevelopment restrictions. And then possibly a presentation from, I'm blanking on the name of the contractor now, a presentation on the DoD initiative from Stantec. Thank you.
I forgot one thing also. I'm working right now on my end of the year accomplishments and fiscal year 2024 goals, and I will provide those to you so you guys can have a look at that.
Great, thank you. Great.
Plastic bag.
Yeah, I
Is that something?
might put that on the one after because that meeting's looking like it might get filled, so maybe on February. So thank you for the reminder on that. All right, so everybody, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Y'all going to Metropolitan tonight or?